Hey everyone, welcome to TA Tech. In today's video, we're going to upgrade the SSD in the ROG Ally from ASUS. Before we get started, if like me, you're into gadgets and into technology, please subscribe and hit that notify button to be notified of future videos. So, with that out of the way, let's get started. So I picked this ASUS ROG Ally up a couple of weeks ago while in Japan. With a 512 gig hard drive, it didn't take long to fill it up with games, so I decided to put the 2TB in it. So I got another 2TB from iFixit, and this is the process for doing the install. So first things here, I'm going to put on some clips that I 3D printed, model in the description, and this will stop the joysticks from getting pushed down and moved around and damaged while we do this task. So first things first, there's 6 screws. We got 3 at the top, 2 at the bottom that all come out, and then we have 1 retained screw that doesn't come out. All screws are the same size and they're all Phillips heads, so we'll use the Phillips head from my iFixit kit to do this. I was going to time lapse this, but the process actually is so quick compared to the Steam Deck that I just did it at normal time just to show how quickly you can get these things removed and get the back off the ROG Ally. So even if you're clumsy like me with the screwdriver, it's still a pretty quick task to complete. Just remove the screws that can be removed. There's 5 of them. I just put them safely away. As I mentioned, the 6th one, which is the middle one at the bottom, is retained in the case and doesn't come out. Next we use a pry tool and we just pop the case open. It's pretty straightforward. There's no cables attached between the back of the case and the actual unit itself. The SD card is not impacted by you removing the back, so unlike the Steam Deck, if you leave the SD card in, you're not going to break it. So just pop off the back and it just comes cleanly off and you can put it to one side. And this is the interior. So we've got the 2 fans, we've got the battery at the bottom, and then under the cover in the middle is the SSD drive itself. Disconnect that battery so that we don't damage the device. You lift up the cover and there's the SSD. 1 screw to remove the SSD and then it just pops out. With the SSD removed, you can put in the new SSD directly and you can re-image it through the BIOS. There's a BIOS setting to go in and set up the a new clean install of the operating system. Or you can do like I did in this case, which is to clone the old drive onto the new drive and thereby save all my settings and all of my files. Obviously this takes a long time as well. It's about 8 or 9 hours to do the clone of the drive. So it's not quicker, but it's certainly easier than having to reinstall everything and set everything back up again. So to do the clone, like with the Steam Deck, you need 2 drives that can take your SSDs. You'll need a boot USB to do Clonezilla. To boot up your laptop from Clonezilla or your PC from Clonezilla so that you can actually do the task of cloning. Place each SSD in each of the drives and then connect those drives up to your laptop or PC. Make sure at this point you have a USB boot drive for your Clonezilla, and you'll have to image that Clonezilla onto that USB boot drive so you can boot it up. In my case, I use a device that I have, which is from IODD. It's the IODD Mini, and it's a small USB drive where you can store images for boot, and you can boot directly from this device. So as you can see here, I'm just selecting Clonezilla Live ISO, and I'm adding that to the virtual drive, and then I can boot up the machine from this virtual drive. So I select the Clonezilla ROM from the list of ROMs, and it boots up into Clonezilla, which is a DOS-based interface. In this particular case, you can select most of the defaults. I wouldn't bother resizing the disk or anything. In my experience, that will be messy with resizing some of the partitions that you're not going to really need to resize, and it's just a waste of drive space. So let it go through its motions, do a image for the standard size. So my old drive was 1 terabyte, which is actually an upgraded drive from the 512 that came in the ROG Ally when I bought it. So as I said, the whole imaging process took about 8 hours. And then the next day, I took that memory card out and put it back into the ROG Ally. The process to put it in is the reverse of the process to take it out. So put the drive back in, screw it in place, replace your battery, put the back on, put those 5 screws back in, and tighten the 6th screw at the bottom that was retained. And with that done, we're complete, so we can turn it back over. Now, in order to get the device booted back up again, we will need to plug it back into power, so we'll do that. First, we'll remove the clips that we put in to protect the joysticks, and then we'll put the power into the device so that we can start the process of booting up and testing the drive. So at this point, because we cloned the drive, we don't need to do anything except for start it up as normal. If we hadn't cloned the drive, we would need to boot into the BIOS, which is I think down button and power, and then you would need to go into advanced settings, and then you would need to go and re-image the device itself. But because we've cloned the drive, we don't need to do that. There is one thing we will need to do though. Once we install this drive and we cloned it, it cloned to the same size as the old drive. So we will need to resize it. To do the resize, I recommend using EaseUS, which is an app you can download online, and that app will allow you to move your partitions about, and then you can use the partition manager to resize the existing partition that you're using. It sounds complicated, but it's not very complicated, very quick to do. First, we'll just make sure that the drive is showing up as a 2 terabyte drive. So we just need to go into the hard drive partitioning tool. Once we're in here, we can see that the drive is 2 terabyte, but it's not fully used. Then we'll run a speed test. This initial speed test showed results that were less than I expected. And this may be that in the background it might have been downloading an application. So I redid these tests further on. So here we have the Steam Deck versus the ROG Ally. And as you can see, the Steam Deck is significantly slower in the drive in my tests. And that's what I would expect from a Gen 3 versus Gen 4. But the drives in both of these are both identical 2 terabyte. Also, while we had it out, I just thought I'd take a look at the screens. When I was looking off angle, the screen on the Steam Deck seemed to be better than the screen on the ROG Ally. But when you're looking directly on, the ROG Ally looks nicer than the Steam Deck. That said, the reflection is quite irritating, and because I have the 512 gig version of the Steam Deck, I have that matte screen, which obviously kills some of the reflections, which is what you want, and that helps the image as well. So while the image is slightly duller, and the colors are brighter on the Ally, but I think they're more stable on the Steam Deck. Depending on what angle you're looking at it, you get a better consistent picture from the Steam Deck. As far as size go, there's not a lot in it. They're very similar, but the ROG Ally definitely does feel smaller in the hand. Next, I took my Switch OLED and just to get a comparison again in size and the screen. All of the screens were on maximum brightness. Again, the offside on the OLED screen is good, just like the Steam Deck, and I think it's better than the ROG Ally. But again, reflections are an irritation with this, and it would be better with a matte screen like the Steam Deck. So that's all three devices side by side. And this is their profile. Again, there's not a lot of difference between the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck, as you'll see when I bring it up beside it. They're very similar sizes. Very little in it. It's more the shape and some of the extensions on the Steam Deck that make it bigger. But there's not a huge amount in it. So as you can see, Steam Deck's probably the second thinnest, followed by the Switch and the ROG Ally being the thickest of the three. But then the Steam Deck being the widest. On the side profile, they're all very similar. Lastly, for a screen comparison, I removed the handles off the Switch, and just to get an idea of how it looks in covering the screen of each of the devices, just to get a rough comparison. So they're all pretty similar in size. There's not a massive difference between any of them. It's really down to what games you want to play and how much you want to spend. And while you can run Windows on the Steam Deck, as I have done here, it can be bothersome. I had some difficulty getting back into SteamOS after putting it in place. So since this video, I've wiped the Steam Deck and I've gone back to pure SteamOS for the Steam Deck. And I've left the ROG Ally to be the Windows device. So with that said, hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something in this or got some useful information. Please like, share and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.